tell me this. Why would HBO's Game of Thrones adaptation drop arguably the most beloved aspect of the books, namely the Azor Ahai prophecy? Short version? They didn't. According to George R. R. Martin, one of the lords in the War of the Roses was prophesied that he would die at Windsor Castle, so he always made plans to avoid that castle. But then, in the First Battle of St. Albans, he was wounded and died outside a pub that had that castle on its pub sign. So, in the words of George R. R. Martin himself, you have to look at prophecies carefully and look at the weasel wording. Or as in-world character Gorgon of Old Gis once wrote, prophecy will bite your prick off every time. So, should we expect Azor Ahai to kill his lover and wield a flaming sword in the Winds of Winter? No. George R. R. Martin has intentionally set up his prophecies to be misleading. But in hindsight, it's pretty clear that Melisandre was partially right. Stannis Baratheon was not the prince who was promised. He couldn't have been since he didn't come from the line of Aerys II and Rhaella. But Stannis was Azor Ahai. In this story, all magic comes at a cost. Only death can pay for life. Stannis gave up some of his own life fire 2 times to create shadow children that looked like him.
Your fires burn low, my king.
Thoros Amir gave up some of his life fire 6 times to raise Beric from the dead, and in the books at least, Beric gave up what little life fire he had left to raise Lady Stoneheart. So begs the question, what about Jon Snow? How did Jon come back to life? Whose life paid for Jon Snow's life? Shireen. Shireen was the one person whom Stannis truly loved. Shireen was Stannis' niece Anissa. In sacrificing her, Stannis unintentionally paid for the rebirth of Jon Snow, or you could say, the hatching of an egg. Aegon Targaryen. Stannis woke a dragon from stone. That's 2 of Melisandre's prophecies for the price of just one little Shireen. But Melisandre made the same mistake as Daemon II Blackfyre during the Second Blackfyre Rebellion. Melisandre had expected to wake a literal dragon as opposed to a figurative dragon, a Targaryen. She was also wrong about the prince who was promised being the same person as Azor Ahai. She didn't know this, but according to the Ghost of Highheart, who is a very accurate greenseer, the prince who was promised would be a child born of Aerys and Rhaella's line. So the prince who was promised could not have ever been Stannis. As we've said many times here, the prince who was promised is probably the prince who was born with the biggest promise in the entire story.
Promise me, Ned.
It's pretty on the nose. But long story short, Stannis was Azor Ahai, Shireen was his love, niece Anissa, and the dragon that he woke, Egg or Aegon Targaryen, the prince who was promised, was Lightbringer.
The sword in the darkness.
Again, it's pretty on the nose. But think about Dany. Dany killed her lover, Khal Drogo, niece Anissa. She literally woke dragons from stone and in doing so created a fiery sword in Drogon. And then we've got Rhaegar. Rhaegar stuck his quote-unquote bloody sword into his love, Lyanna. She later died in childbirth, and that child is none other than Jon Snow himself, the sword in the darkness, Lightbringer. So the show shouldn't get hated on for dropping prophecy, because they didn't. But who really was Azor Ahai? Was it Rhaegar, Dany, or Stannis? Yes.